We showcase the success other businesses are having and how you can have it too. Sit back, relax, listen, and check out Rocket Lawyer's Small Business Spotlight. Hey everybody, thanks for being here at the Rundown with Ramon. My name is Ramon Ray, publisher of zoneofgenius.com. We're talking to David Witkowski, who's with Das Flecht and a Rocket Lawyer customer. We're going to talk about his business, building his business, and the power of legal protection and more for your business. David, I hope your day is going well today. How are things in your world?
Everything's great here. Thanks very much. Thanks for having me on the show.
We're glad to have you here, David. You and I had a very geekish discussion prior to this, so we'll have to share a part two of all our talking about antennas and radio waves and more. But David, thanks for being here today. Tell us, David, a bit about yourself personally, if you like. I don't know if you have a dog, a cat, or whatever you do in your private life. And then let's dive into Das Flecht, what that is and who you serve. But tell us a bit, David, about yourself.
Yeah, so I'm a Silicon Valley resident for several decades now. I'm an electrical engineer by trade, have a family and 2 dogs and 2 kids. And I live about 25 miles south of San Jose. So we live in the Santa Cruz area, which is on Monterey Bay. It's a beautiful area. Love living here. And Das Flecht is the company that we have just recently started. It is a company that is using technology to improve wireless coverage in indoor spaces for businesses, ultimately getting into outdoor and even potentially into home applications.
I love that. And so give us advice, David. You've been in business for a while and done some pretty cool things based on my just a brief getting to know you. What is your advice to business owners? What have you done right over the years? What are things you say, Ramon, here's some things I've done wrong that if I could do it again, I may not have done it. What's your advice for business owners as they're growing their businesses and maybe even in the technology space?
So I think it's the lesson that I've learned early on with the companies that I've started, and in fact, my first company, was to always pay attention to market dynamics and make sure that you understand the regulatory environment, because things can change and you think that you have a market and then things in the market may shift. And if you're out there busy putting up antennas like I was doing, and you don't pay attention to where the market's going, suddenly you wake up one day, and this is literally what happened to me in my first company. I woke up one day and realized that the market had changed, and I was not paying attention because I was busy making money. So I think it's important to obviously work hard, but also to keep your ear on the ground. Attend conferences, make sure that you're keeping up on all of the regulatory and legal stuff that comes along with owning a business.
I love it. And what are you doing now different, as it were, with Das Flecht? As you think about how you're paying attention to the economy, you're helping businesses, and I'm guessing governments and consumers, anybody with an antenna and who needs waves, radio waves. But what are you doing differently? You mentioned already conferences and all that. Are you attending more of them, asking more questions, and then maybe listening more and always having a bit of an edge? I know Intel CEO, founder Andy Grove used to say the paranoid survive. Is that kind of the new David, what you're doing, or am I off base there?
I think for me, it's, I'm a member of the IEEE, which is the Institute for Electrical and Electronic Engineers. It's the world's largest technical organization. As a senior member of the IEEE, I'm involved in several things, and they relate to the work that we're doing. Mm-hmm. So for me, it's really about being part of the IEEE, making sure that I am monitoring what's going on. Obviously, right now we're in the 5G era, but 6G is going to be coming at some point. Mm-hmm. We've started talking about what 6G looks like, and I'm keeping an eye on what that means, because what Das Flecht is doing has applicability to 6G as well as 5G. And so it's really about sort of soothsaying, predicting the future, and I think that it's good to go to those conferences to understand what's happening.
Yeah. And so that would go for the business owners, whether you're in a technical industry or not. One thing I'm hearing from you, you're an IEEE, and I know IEEE well, but also going into your industry conferences, right? That's where your peers in the industry, your brothers and sisters in industry are there, can tell you, hey, here's what we're doing. Here's what we're doing. Here's what we think is real. Here's what's not. And you can then make your own judgment on that, if that makes sense. Let's look back at Das Flecht and talk about that business. Talk a bit about more what it is, who you serve, and maybe give a for example for our listener listening. Maybe they should be using using DAS Flag services. Help us understand a bit more about that, please.
And so obviously we all want our devices to work. And if we're in an office environment, poor connectivity can affect the ability of the device to download files or just even to make phone calls. So what DAS Flag does is it takes the existing signal in an office environment, a stadium, a mall, a hospital, a lot of different, what we would call an enterprise environment, and it takes the existing signal and redirects it where it needs to go. And this is less expensive than adding antennas in that office environment. So adding antennas is about 4 times more expensive than our products, which is, and what we really see as the opportunity here is just to get better coverage for a low price.
I love that. And is it fair enough to say that in this situation, David, that it's not even a technological issue per se, but for the end user, it's one of 2 things, and feel free to correct me if I'm wrong, but it's entertainment. As one who's been to the baseball and football game, you don't care about the stuff you care about, speeds and feeds. I want my cell phone to work. I want my iPad to work. I want to get connectivity in the airport. And then 2, the business case, because we're not making money. We're not serving customers. We can't get orders right if I don't have that. Is that kind of how one can think of it for the need? Is that sound fair?
Yeah, think about it like, for example, if you own a hospital and you have all of your equipment now is all connected. The pill dispenser cart is now connected. The prescriptions come into that cart via the wireless connection. Now, if the connection in a particular hospital room is poor, then the pill cart won't work. Doctors don't carry paper around anymore. There's no paper charts. It's all electronic now. Even you think about it in an environment like a shopping mall where you have store owners and they have payment terminals and they connect over the internet as well. So everything that we have today connects wirelessly. So poor connectivity really affects our ability to do business. What DAS Flag does is it redirects the signal from an existing network to where it needs to be without having to add expensive infrastructure.
I love that's powerful. Well, David, thanks for being here. And again, to everybody who's interested, DASFLECT, DASFLECT.com. You mentioned regulatory industry and et cetera, and definitely when you're dealing with radio waves, I think is that the proper word, radio waves? Okay, radio waves, antennas, the sky and public access, you're dealing with a lot of regulatory issues. Talking about that aspect, talk about the legal aspects of your business, David, and I'm particularly talking about Rocket Lawyer. I know you use Rocket Lawyer quite a bit for your business. Talk about the legal implications side of why that's so important. And then right next to that, I guess that leads to why you're using Rocket Lawyer, but help educate people why, but dotting your I's and crossing your T's is even more important possibly in your business, and then about Rocket Lawyer.
Yeah, definitely. I think that maintaining your regulatory compliance in an RF world is very key. The Federal Communications Commission has rules about devices that emit RF signals. Spectrum is a shared commons, as an economist would refer to it. It's spectrum is like dirt, right? It's the dirt we have is the dirt we have. We're not going to get a bigger planet anytime soon. So we have to make use of what we have. And so as spectrum becomes more and more shared, compliance with spectrum rules becomes really key. And with us, it's a question of getting through that regulatory compliance process and making sure that we are doing everything correct. On the legal side, we have, obviously, as a small startup in the Silicon Valley, there are a number of documents that we need to put in place, ranging from simple incorporation, which we used Rocket Lawyer to do, to non-disclosure agreements with our various vendors. I have some contractors that I'm working with. That takes, some paper to get those contracts put in place, specifying statements of work, having consultant agreements. If we're going to work with a university, we want to have paper around that. So really, just it's a question of protecting ourselves because we are a small company. I can't afford to deal with any legal complications at this point. And so it really is nice to have the ability to generate quality legal documents in an easy way. And I don't have time, and I don't want to pay, I don't want to go out and find a Silicon Valley lawyer that charges me $1,000 an hour to do that. So And there are lots of those around, and I'm sure they'd be
Mhm.
happy to take my money.
Yeah.
But currently, a seed funded startup, we have to maximize our capital for development of the product, and so not spending that money on legal fees and using Rocket Lawyer helps me direct my money towards the engineering, which is where we need to be right now.
Yeah, a few things I want to unpack there, David, for you or for myself. I think one, we heard one of our interviews who was saying that as big as your dream is, or as big as the value you think it is, as much as you should protect what you're doing. When you hear something like that, does that resonate with what you're saying? He was saying, "Hey, listen, as important as this is, I need to protect it. If it wasn't important, who cares?" But I'm
Yep.
hearing you say, kind of echoing that same thing. This is important
Yeah.
to me. Therefore, I need to do everything I can to protect what I'm building. Is that a fair statement?
I think it's very true. I mean, I've been in the startup world for a while now. I've been in Silicon Valley for perhaps longer than I care to admit. Um, and when you think about it, a startup, figure it's going to be 10 years of your life.
Mm-hmm.
All right. So in the Valley, we joke around as you get older. You say, well, I don't know how many startups I have left in me.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And part of that is just a recognition of a startup takes 10 years to do successfully. And so if you waste time, yeah, obviously that puts you at a disadvantage. But also, I think the point is that you are putting your blood, sweat, and tears into this thing, and it's takes a lot of psychic effort to get through making a startup. It takes a certain amount of chutzpah, as they would say,
Mm-hmm.
and
Mm-hmm.
and that gives you a real sense that you don't want to waste time,
Yeah.
right? And you don't want complications. There's already enough complication in the Silicon Valley and in starting a company that I don't want to add to that. And so not having to worry about legal issues it takes one thing off my plate so that I can go stress out about something else.
I love that. And Rocket Lawyer definitely does that, takes out the stress for a small business. Another thing you mentioned I thought was interesting, David, is the monetary aspects. And again, God bless America. Everybody can charge whatever they want, however much they want. But we've heard this echoing theme as well, is that with Rocket Lawyer, bottom line, it's just cheaper. It's great legal service, but much more affordable than paying $500, $600, $1,000 an hour for an attorney. Talk about why that's so important to you, and or maybe talk to other business owners. This aspect of still getting legal service, but yet being able to have it much more affordable and budget centered for you. Why is that so important?
Yeah, I think it in an environment where you can go out and you can hire a lawyer for a lot of money, and I'm sure they're great, right? And
Sure.
I know several lawyers in Silicon Valley, and they're wonderful. And
Yep.
we actually do have a human lawyer for complex things,
Mm-hmm.
but for basic things like non-disclosure agreements, I don't need a lawyer for that. I can just generate one online. And what I love about Rocket Lawyer is that it has the electronic signature feature. So it's kind of, like a DocuSign sort of a thing.
Yep.
And then that just makes it easy. Then not only do I have it signed, but now I have a record of it. I can assign the NDA to various people
Mm-hmm.
if I need multiple signatures on it. And so from that perspective, I think it's really useful. The other thing is that I think a lot of times we think that legal documentation needs to be complex. And what I've
Mm-hmm.
realized in using Rocket Lawyer is that there are standard things that I can just generate automatically, or semi-automatically, I guess, because I have to type in all the data.
Mm-hmm.
But it's still cheaper than going out and paying my guy, $600 an hour. So that saves me a lot, and I'm if he's listening to the podcast, sorry, Dave, I love you, but I gotta as well as I do that I gotta save my money where I can.
Absolutely. Talking about saving money, as you may know, David, Rocket Lawyer has an annual membership or an annual fee that you can pay as well and get kind of a soup to nuts, all your legal services for one legal fee. So I think that one annual fee, so that saves money for sure as well. So I don't know if you're using that, but if you're not,
Yeah,
you
we are. We're a
definitely.
subscriber. Yeah,
Okay, great.
so
Rocket
yeah,
Legal. Yep.
yeah,
Yep.
we have I think it's the annual plan.
Yep.
Definitely, we're on that. It
Yeah.
saves a little bit of money in the long run.
Yeah. David, talking to business owners who you've been with several startups and growing, what would you say to them is one of the key impediments, stopping points to their success and growth that you'd say, hey, if you want to be a successful entrepreneur, here's how to do it beyond the legal aspect we've touched on. And or would you say, here's what you really need to do as an entrepreneur to move out of maybe a startup phase and to grow that business? What would you say to them, or answer both ways?
So I think understanding your customers is really key.
Mm.
The thing that I think a lot of people do in the startup world, and I've seen this happen more than once, is they come up with an idea
Mm-hmm.
and they fall in love with their own idea.
Mm.
And then they believe that they have a product and they envision that they have a market for it. And they talk to their friends at a social event and they go, well, that sounds really cool. Yeah, great. It sounds really cool. Who are your customers, right? When you're talking about, and this is advice that I've developed over the years, but I've
Mm-hmm.
also received it from venture capitalists who are friends of mine I've worked with in the past. They'll ask me questions like, well, how many customers have you talked to about this? Not your friends, just
Yeah.
people that you don't know.
Yes.
Okay, and how many times have you talked to them? Because the first conversation, they're always going to say nice things. But then if you have more than one conversation with them, say like 3 or 4, then you really begin to develop an understanding, because in that second or third conversation, they start asking questions.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, understanding your customers is really critical. So, you should be targeting any entrepreneur who's got an idea. I encourage you to go for it. There's nothing like starting a company and bringing it to fruition and then seeing it grow. It's a huge, as a parent, it's that sort of a feeling. But I think what you want to do is you want to go out and you want to say, I need to talk to a dozen customers, and I need to talk to each one of them 3 to 4 times.
Mm.
And that means you're having 4 dozen conversations.
Mm-hmm.
And I get that. But that validates your idea. And those customers can then provide letters of intent, which then you can turn around and you can take to an investor and say, hey, look, I have 12 letters of intent from customers, and I've had 4 conversations with each one of them. And they are saying, if I bring a product to market, here is what I'm going to buy it for. Mm-hmm. And I want to be your first customer. And here's a piece of paper that actually says that. So, or I guess an email in our world, not a piece of paper. But
Yeah.
yes, so I think customer validation is really the key to making a company be more than just, I had a great idea and I think people are going to buy this, to I have a great idea and I know people are going to buy this.
I love that, David. I think that is powerful. And I think it leads me back also to what we talked about with Rocket Lawyer. I think that I find that as an entrepreneur myself, as one who started 5 companies, sold 3 companies, and done some really cool things, not as cool as what you're doing with radio frequency, but done some cool things, David, I think is as well as that having everything you can do that's not directly for your business, have somebody else do, if that makes sense. At least what I found. So for me, legal services, I don't have to be an expert in it. Rocket Lawyer can help with that. Ask a Lawyer can help with it. The Rocket Lawyer memberships can do that. I can focus on my business. And I'm sure, David, you're the only one who can get to know the customer like you. But legal services, that's something you can outsource to a partner like Rocket Lawyer. Does that kind of make sense?
I agree with that. I mean, again, it gets back to the question of time, right?
Yeah.
If I'm in a phase where I am talking to a dozen customers and trying to develop relationships with them and dealing with engineering and dealing with regulatory issues, and then I've got to turn around and I've got to spend 20% of my week doing legal work, then that's just time that I'm not investing in thinking about my customers and thinking about the end result of the engineering work that we're doing. So not having to spend a lot of time worrying about legal is good for development. It's good for customer validation. Ultimately, having that, and when I go before the venture capitalists and say, here's my idea, would you please invest in my company? That can be the difference between a valuation at one level, possibly a higher valuation, more investment, and ultimately at the end of the day, that makes your company stronger.
Yeah, no, powerful. David, anything I didn't ask you today, and I'm sure we could go on for hours, but anything I didn't ask you today that you wanted to bring out to help the entrepreneur, help the business owner, and or about Rocket Lawyer, anything else you wanted to add before we conclude today?
I don't think so. I mean, we've covered it pretty well.
Good. One more time, David, tell us about DasFlect, what you do, who you serve, one more time on your website. Would love to give you some more boost on that so people who may be needing a solution can come and see you. One more time, tell us about DasFlect.
DasFlect improves wireless networks in indoor environments by redirecting the existing signals to the places where they need to be. We are at www.dasflect.com, and I would encourage you to check us out. And if you have any questions, reach out, and I'll be happy to talk to you.
I love it, David. Thank you. And I'm Ramon Ray, and on behalf of Rocket Lawyer, who's another amazing customer who's finding that they can get amazing legal service from Rocket Lawyer, annual memberships, and more to help you with your personal side or business side. You can see all those things and more, and even ask a lawyer at rocketlawyer.com. I'm Ramon Ray, publisher of zoneofgenius.com. David, thanks for being here. Appreciate it.